Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
Hey guys, and welcome to the podcast, Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm really delighted about today's guest. He's James from Student Loan Planner, and we've had guests from Student Loan Planner in the past. And today he's going to talk to us all about the implications of the one big, beautiful bill that was recently passed and how it impacts student loans ranging from all the way from med students, residents, early, mid, late career attendings, and it's going to be a really fascinating discussion. So, James, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I know this topic is really timely and relevant to your audience, so I'm happy to dive into it with you.
Yeah, and just briefly for the new audience and listeners, introduce yourself, and we'll dive into the questions.
Yeah, so my name is James Mwombela. I'm from Durham, North Carolina, originally from DC, but I live in Durham right now. I've been a financial planner for a little over 10 years, but over the last 3 years, I have really focused on clients who are in the 20s to 40s range, really in that sort of younger professional age range, and with significant student loan debt. Last 3 years, I've been working not only with Student Loan Planner, providing consultations for borrowers just about student loans, but also in my financial planning work has been focused on clients with at least $100,000 of student loan balances.
Yeah. And what a fantastic segue, because I know there's student loans are the top of mind for a lot of, obviously the audience are high income. We gear it towards doctors, but of course you gain significant debt through law school, dental school, business schools. Talk about how the recent bill, the one big beautiful bill, and how it impacts just generally student loans pre-Trump era.
Okay, so I would say that I would start by saying this is the most sweeping student loan legislation we've seen in a long time. A lot of changes that people need to be aware of. And so if I were to boil it down to two main changes, it's really affecting existing students or people who are planning to borrow for their education in the future, and that people who have already borrowed and they're repaying their loans. So for people who are in school right now or really people who are considering enrolling into a program for graduate professional school, the amount of federal student loans that you can take out to finance their education is now lower than before. So starting July 2026, they've instituted some caps. And so essentially the federal government is taking a much lower role in helping students pay for their graduate professional education than they used to. And then for existing borrowers who are paying back their loans, the One Big Beautiful Bill limited repayment options and generally made income-based repayment less generous than it used to be. So essentially, you're looking at a less generous federal government when you want to take out loans to go to school, and you're looking at a less generous federal government when you have loans and you're paying them back.
Okay, yeah, really fascinating. And I know because a lot of the audience and listeners, they were, especially like during residency, you could qualify for income-based, and then we'll just start from for example, we'll just start with med students, and either those that have already matriculated, like this is first year, or that are thinking about it, or that are going to graduate into a residency. What factors should they be considering?
No one should have to choose between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina is helping to create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters through the Purple Leash Project, so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Okay, good question. I would say there's two main categories to think about here. If you're already in school right now, but you're not finished yet, and you won't be finished as of July 2026. You've got additional years of schooling left. What's one category? And then people who are considering going to med school right now. So thankfully, or maybe you could say this is thankfully, if you're already enrolled in a program, you're not limited by the new borrower limits, or I guess, the borrower limits do not kick in for you through the duration of your current program. So you're grandfathered into the original borrowing limits, which is up to the full cost of education.
Wow.
So that's good news in that you don't have to think, how am I going to pay for school? But one thing you do need to think about is you're still able to borrow a significant amount of debt because you don't have those new limits. But coming out of school, repayment's not going to be as generous as it used to. So again, depending on where you're going to be working, about 60 to 70% of doctors end up working at a nonprofit hospital. So they can do public service loan forgiveness, right? And we can talk more about that. How that's still here to stay. We don't need to worry about that. But for any doctors who are working private practice, if you're in school right now, they're still borrowing based on the older limits. You might need to think about, it may be more likely that you end up having to pay off your loans because, again, coming out of school, repayment options aren't going to be as generous as they used to be. So that's the people who are in school right now. For those considering going to school, you are going to be subject to the new borrowing limits starting July of next year. So it's a whole different ballgame now in terms of how do we finance graduate school, medical school. Of course, this includes, like I said, lawyers, dentists, chiropractors, veterinarians, the ones who have the most expensive tuition for professional school, right? Federal student loans alone are not going to cut it like they used to. In the past, you could borrow unsubsidized federal student loans. You could borrow what's called Grad PLUS loans as much as you needed to cover the cost of education, including some living expenses. So you really had everything you needed. Now they've eliminated the Grad PLUS program, and now the total limit that you can take out for a professional student is $200,000.
Wow.
Now, Chris, tell me, what does that amount mean to you if you're thinking about going to med school?
Basically, I mean, in my cohort, my generation, you heard of people. There was this one guy, he was on Twitter bragging that he was $800,000 in student loan debt, and that's just I mean,
that's
average.
not even the highest balance I've seen. Highest balances I've seen were dentists. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. If you go to a highly expensive like a New York or Harvard or very expensive San Francisco, these tuitions are probably $100K plus a year. You're obviously going to come out with significant. But if you stay in state and you're frugal, you live frugally, $200K is manageable. But it sounds like the belt is tightening on how much people can borrow and how much the government is willing to subsidize and help people with their student loan and educational debt.
Yeah, like you said, the belt's tightening. You're under more limits as far as how much you can borrow from the federal government. So for most people, there's going to be a funding gap there, and they're going to have to figure out how to cover it. Some people are fortunate enough that they've got parents or family who can finance their education, right? Otherwise, you're going to have to look to private student loans, right? And this means we're going to see a lot more borrowing in the private student loan marketplace. And in my time advising clients on student loans, I did not run into private loans that often, especially for graduate professional school, because of the unlimited borrowing up to the cost of education. And so it's a different ballgame now in the student loans. We're gonna start to see a lot more private loans. And unfortunately, Chris, we might see some predatory practices in the private student loan space because they're taking advantage of students who are desperate to meet this funding gap. So so that's really one of the main differences we're going to see is higher private loan borrowing to cover that gap.
Interesting. So then we'll talk about residency and then early, mid, late career attendings and the idea of paying. How much should you pay off or should you just continue? The other question I have for you is what is it going to do to school tuition? Because I know, for example, like a couple of schools, they subsidize the first year and lower the cost. A lot of them are giving scholarships and through their endowments. There's talk about limiting the time in med school to 3 years instead of 4 years. So what's that going to do for the overall schools and the cost of tuition and education? Is it going to stay steady, constant, or schools are just going to be like, screw you, or these are our tuition. If you can't afford it, too bad.
Well, Chris, that's a very good question because higher education is one of the only industries that I can think of where their client base, their customer base can borrow an unlimited amount of money to pay for what you offer. Think about what kind of incentive that creates. It definitely there isn't as strong as an incentive to keep the cost of what you offer affordable as there would be if your customers were coming out of pocket to cover it. Does that make sense? So we would expect to see just the same way that this belt tightening effect we're talking about, we should see that with these institutions, with medical schools, with other graduate and professional schools, where in order to keep butts in seats, in order to keep people enrolling and keep that money coming in, they may need to make tuition more affordable and cut the fat in their organizations. Maybe they've got some highly paid executives somewhere in their school that they may realize, okay, we're paying you so much because we could afford to before and we just can't. Yeah. So we need to shift resources to where they're most important, right? Faculty, research, having the right types of technology and everything for the students, good facilities. And then with that, they may be able to lower tuition to make it more affordable and to keep enrollment up. Yeah.
And you mentioned what was interesting is, so for example, you have someone who's matriculated, they got into their dream school and they're trying to finance it. And let's say the federal government will subsidize a certain portion of it, but not all of it. What are some red flags? Because you've heard about in the past people getting in trouble with student loans where they didn't know what they were signing and now they're responsible for. So what are red flags to watch out for in the private lending market?
One red flag would be unreasonably high interest rates would be something to watch out for. So great thing about internet these days, right? You can just Google real quick and see what are prevailing interest rates for private student loans and make sure that you're not taken advantage of there. And otherwise, I would say read the promissory note and that you receive when you're at the stage of, okay, I like the offer, the interest rate looks good. Now I'm looking at the terms and I'm thinking of signing to officially take this debt on. Read that and just make sure that there's nothing in there that gives you pause. You don't have to be a money expert to know that, hey, there's some provisions here that are not reasonable. And this just doesn't seem like it's reasonable. It seems like it'll make the cost of repayment much more of a burden than it needs to be. For instance, it's common that the interest will accrue while you're in school, and then interest might be added to the principal once you graduate, and then there you go. Then you have to be into repayment mode. But do you see any fees that are being arbitrarily added to your balance at different points that you're in school? Do you see that in the agreement that there's going to be unreasonable fees attached or things like that? That's something that anyone, even if they haven't borrowed this type of money before, would raise their eyebrows.
Yeah. And I know we have around 5-10 minutes remaining. What for residents and attendings, how does the one big beautiful bill affect them as much as just people contemplating, or what factors should they be aware of? Should they just pay off their student loans and just get them done with? How should they be thinking about this?
For residents and attending physicians, they're in a much different category from what I described, right? We talked about two categories of borrowers so far: people who are considering going to school, people who are enrolled and they're still in school, they have more years left. Now we're talking about people who graduated, right? That they're in repayment. The most important thing is they need to be very careful about, or I guess that's just the first thing to think about. They need to be very careful about taking out any additional student loans or consolidating their loans. And when I say consolidating, I mean within the federal system. You get a new student loan that pays off your existing loans. Now you have this new loan that you're paying back to the federal government. And either of those actions, taking out more loans. Why would they take out more loans? Chris, I had a consult once. This guy had an MD, he had an MBA. Some people they're career changers. They decide they're interested in something else. They want to go back to school and take a class. Taking out any loans, whether it's a brand new loan for education or consolidating your loans to a new loan with the federal government after July 2026, severely limits your repayment options, even more than they're already going to be limited. So that's really the first thing to think about. Be very careful about taking out any new loans or consolidating after July 2026. Wow. If you don't do that, you will still get access to the income-based repayment plan. Basically, going forward, they want everyone to choose who's on the income-based repayment plan. They want them to choose between income-based repayment and the new RAP or RAP plan that was established by the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so if you borrow any loans after July 2026, RAP is your only option for an income-driven repayment plan. And we can talk in more detail about what that means. But suffice to say, for a lot of people, the RAP plan is not going to be where they want to go. They didn't create that plan to be more generous. So in order to still have access to the income-based repayment plan, you need to not have taken out any loans past that date. And as far as okay, so what does that mean for your loan strategy? The most important thing is to figure out, am I getting these loans forgiven or am I paying these off? Like I said earlier, between 60 to 70% of doctors end up working full time during their attending years at a nonprofit hospital, right? So if you think about that, everyone's working for a nonprofit hospital during residency and fellowship, right? Now, I have run into some private for-profit hospitals where people did their residencies and fellowships. It happens, right? But for the most part, you're at a nonprofit 501c3 hospital. So almost every doctor can get credit towards public service loan forgiveness while they're in training. And like I said, 60 to 70% will then continue at a nonprofit hospital during their attending years. You need 10 years of qualifying employment and making payments to get your loans forgiven via PSLF. So if you're doing that, you still need to get on the income-based repayment plan. And again, you need to make sure that you're on the right plan and you don't make any decisions that could lock you out of a much more affordable repayment plan. Whereas if you end up going private practice, then you might end up having to pay off your loans. It really depends on your debt to income ratio. So I would say, even though overall student loan repayment is not as generous as it used to be, what hasn't changed is, as a physician, you got to figure out, am I going for forgiveness or am I private practice and I make a lot of money relative to my debt? In which case I need to pay my loans off. You have to make that assessment. And then if you are going for forgiveness, make sure that you do everything you can to keep your payments as low as possible.
Interesting. And I know I wish we had another half hour or so, because I know a lot of the audience, they're asking, like, what is their consolidation strategy before to get into this income-based or the RAP plan? And for attendings, are they grandfathered in, like they're on a repayment plan? Can they change that? I know there's a lot of questions. So how do you help people listening to this? What can they come to you for advice, and what's your contact information?
Yeah, Student Loan Planner. We've been around since 2016. We've advised on billions of student loan debt combined with all the clients that we've seen. And so studentloanplanner.com, if they go there, they can get access to a good amount of free resources, calculators, articles that we have in our blog section. We have a podcast as well where we're educating people on these topics. And then we also offer paid consultations. So you can meet with us for an hour, and all we need is an hour to put together a personalized strategy for what makes the most sense for you, whether you're in residency or you're already attending. Actually, I met with a I met with the doctor in his first year of residency yesterday, and we put together a strategy for him to take the most advantage of these lower income years, have a really affordable payment on the income-based repayment plan. And then he said there's about a 60% chance, he's an orthopedic surgeon, 60-70% chance he's going to stay at an academic institution. So then I talked through what are the different strategies and loopholes he can do. What are the different strategies and loopholes that he can take advantage of to keep his payment as low as possible for those 10 years and get the loans forgiven? Yeah, so that's how you can get in touch with us. You can book a consult right online if you need to. And I'm happy to give a little summary to answer to answer the questions you're talking about. Who's grandfathered, who has access to what, RAP plan, IBR. I'm happy to do that if you think it would be helpful at the time we have left.
Yeah. I know we have around 2 minutes, and if the next guest doesn't show up, we just continue the conversation, and because it's really important. For example, consolidation. So should all med students be consolidating, and how can they avoid? Sounds like the RAP plan is worse off than the income-based plan, the PSLF. So how should graduating med students be thinking about this?
Yeah, so if you just graduated med school, right? Consolidating your loans right now is not a bad idea, because you can turn 5 to 10 different loans that you took out into one loan with the federal government. And it just simplifies your situation. You have one loan, one payment. And for a lot of people, they feel better about that than having sort of a basket of different loans for every year they attended school. So that's not a bad idea. For anyone else, I would be very hesitant to consolidate loans right now, just because we're still figuring out exactly how they treat your payment history and the credit you've already established towards forgiveness on that new consolidation loan. Just with the change of administration, the Biden administration was already tinkering with it. And then we had a change of administration before they even fully implemented it. There's a gray area there. So the only people who you could consolidate, if you just liked to simplify the look of your situation, would be anyone who's just graduated. But again, July 2026 is the most important date here. If you consolidate your loans after that, you might lock yourself into the RAP plan and not have access to IBR anymore. And for some people, that could end up being a lot more expensive for them. So for the most part, I would say don't look at consolidating your loans right now. Again, it's only that very unique group of people who just graduated right now can look into that. For everyone else, no need to consolidate. The important thing is to know that as long as you don't take out any new loans after July 2026, you are grandfathered into the income-based repayment plan. And so it's important for you to compare that to the RAP plan and see which one's better for you. If you ever enroll in the RAP plan, you got to stay there. You can't leave. So it's important to evaluate both options before you make that decision.
And then people that are currently paying off their student loans, either just they consolidated or they're on this PSLF or income based, are they grandfathered in, or how should they be thinking? Should they just continue making their payments, or how should they be thinking about it?
Yeah, so basically you fall into two categories. You're either still have your loans in the federal system. You did not. When you say consolidate, you might be talking about a private loan, like basically refinancing to a private loan. So yeah, if your loans are still in the federal system, you're working for a nonprofit hospital, which is the majority of doctors. A lot of them are on the SAVE plan, which was halted by the lawsuit. And the One Big Beautiful Bill said that's going to be gone by 2028 at the latest. Yeah. So a lot of doctors you might be on a plan that's about to be kicked to the curb. So the most important thing is to evaluate IBR versus RAP. Because remember, to get PSLF, you need 10 years of payments on an income-based plan while you have the qualifying employment. So going forward, long-term, it's IBR or RAP. And it depends on your situation, which one is better for you. So you need to weigh those two options and look at any kind of loopholes, like filing taxes and filing separately, maxing out a 403B and a 457B account, different ways to declare your income that can help you minimize that payment throughout PSLF. Whereas if you, let's say you're private practice, right? And so you don't have access to PSLF, or you already refinance your loans to a private loan, you took advantage of 3%, 2% interest rate several years ago, right? nothing's really changed for you. You already were in the path of paying off your loans. And so, yeah, you should just continue as you are.
Excellent. I think our next guest is here, but we thank you so much for coming on. And we're also doing a webinar recurring webinar series. We'd love to have your input, especially with student loans and taxes and debt, and especially with the change in administration and just so many rule changes. It would be really great to get your insight again. So thanks so much for coming on, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. You're welcome for you talked about having me on. I enjoyed it. Happy to be here. And we'd be happy to participate in that webinar. Because like you said, things are changing all the time.
Yeah. And it's very timely. So thanks again. And thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Feeling the AI anxiety? From questions to job security to cybersecurity and everything in between, it's easy to feel overwhelmed with the rate of AI innovation. Enter Aria, the enterprise AI orchestration and security platform built to boost your confidence. With Aria, you don't have to compromise between speed and innovation or security and governance. Quickly deploy AI without cutting corners on compliance. Give your teams the confidence to adopt AI with Aria. Ready to eliminate your AI anxiety? Visit aria.com to get started for free today. That's AIRIA.com.
Welcome, Chris. Take care.